Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Thursday, December 4th, 2025, and we're back on the topic of the frozen Russian assets and the attempts by the European Union to seize them. So we've had another desperate attempt from Ursula von der Leyen. Here on the screen you see an image from the press conference she gave yesterday, and you can see the title of it, Addressing Ukraine's Financing Needs for 2026-2027. So it's curious that Ukraine is not a member of the European Union, and they dedicate so much time and energy to trying to maintain Ukraine afloat when many of the European Union countries are in difficult financial times and struggling, and things are only getting worse for them. So quite amazing that this is really the only topic that they ever want to talk about, and the only priority. And so apparently Ukraine has somewhere between February and April to shore up their finances, or they're going to go belly up. At least that is what we're being told. So Ursula is in a panic, rushing about, trying to come up with some mechanism to seize the frozen Russian assets and use them for this, use them for that, make a loan to Ukraine, a loan which they could never and will never pay back. So all this is should be very concerning for European Union member nations, that so much time and effort is being put into something that is really really not productive for the member states, and is only going to indebt them even more and leave them on the hook for money that will more than likely just disappear into someone's bank account and never help Ukraine with what they think it will do. So so many promises have been made about that money, but really that money is going to be split up, and the European Union wants to take most of it, and some for Ukraine. And so if they fail at this, then they have the other option, the second option, which is a loan from European Union nations to Ukraine for the same amount, the 90 billion, and for the next two fiscal years, 2026, 2027, in Ukraine. And that will more than likely be rejected, because that is a tremendous amount of money, and the European Union nations, where will they be pulling that money from? So anyway, we have Ursula with a desperation effort to get that money, and they put out a statement here on the European Union website, and so you'll have the link below in the description of this video. Anyway, you can see this is they're trying to get a package. Consists of proposed regulation to establish a reparations loan, a proposal to prohibit any transfer of immobilized Russian central bank assets back to Russia, two proposals that put in place important safeguards for the reparations loan, a proposed amendment of the current multi-annual financial framework to allow for the use of EU budget to underpin a loan to Ukraine. So basically they're incorporating Ukraine in financially into the European Union. And as I mentioned in previous videos, this is like a little boat attaching itself to the Titanic as it is going down. The result, of course, will be disastrous for the European Union, but none of them seem to be heeding any calls to reverse course. And if we take a look at Euroclear, which is holding the assets, we have this effort by the EU to try to force Belgium to cough up the money. And could the EU force Belgium to cough up the Russian frozen assets? Yes, but all 27 countries need to agree unanimously. And I'm sure you'll have a few there that will not agree. And a majority vote by the EU cannot force Belgium. It has to be unanimous. So what if the EU tries to override Belgium anyway? It would be illegal, and there would be challenges in court. And the EU would lose because unanimity is a treaty obligation. So Belgium, being one of the 27 nations, would vote against it. So there we have one vote against it. So there would never be unanimity anyway. So all this is looking really bad for Ursula von der Leyen. But she still keeps on trying. In fact, they've been trying since March of 2022 to seize those assets. We have here from Ukrainska Pravda, basically money in the bank, money in the pocket for Ukraine. They're already counting on 90 billion from the European Union. So according to Ukrainska Pravda, it looks pretty certain they'll be getting that money. Then we have from the Kiev Independent, EU unveils two options for getting 90 billion to Ukraine in coming years. So this is a little less confident, but still repeating the EU talking point. So anyway, the Kiev Independent did put out an article in which there was a study done that showed that if Ukraine collapsed after a Russian victory, it would cost the European Union 1.6 trillion to cover the defensive costs that Ukraine is covering right now by continuing the war. So anyway, this amount, hard to say exactly how they came up with it and why they would even need to spend that, but the point is, 90 billion versus 1.6 trillion, it's hands down you should go with the 90 billion, but this is a very short-sighted and tainted study, so I don't think anyone believes this, but pretty interesting that they try to convince people with all these arguments. Now recently, this is back November 26th, the IMF is going to be giving Ukraine 8.1 billion over 4 years, so 2 billion per year for 4 years. So that's just still kind of pittance compared to what they really need, but it does get them a little bit of short-term money to continue on. And of course, this is coming from the U.S. taxpayer. And we have here President Zelensky in Ireland to receive a pledge from Ireland for 125 million to support Ukraine. And if you can think that the one of the top strikers in the English Premier League, Alexander Isak, cost Liverpool 129 million. This is the kind of money we're talking about. So, we're into striker territory. Belgium, meanwhile, has pushed back and continues to push back on all these plans, and they've kind of doubled down. They're really getting fed up with all these efforts by Ursula to seize the money. And even the ECB chimed in, and they said that they declined to provide emergency liquidity for reparations loan to Ukraine. So the ECB doesn't think it's a good idea. Belgium and Euroclear doesn't think it's a good idea. Now, who runs Euroclear? So we go to see who are the top 10 shareholders. Sicovam, which is Euroclear France, another French company, Belgium company, Belgium shareholders, New Zealand fund, China, Denmark, Singapore, Australia, Brussels. So none of these shareholders are pushing Euroclear to let the money go. So, the people in finance are not convinced by anything that Ursula is saying, and the Belgian Prime Minister has said this is fundamentally wrong. Now you can see that that Belgium is really starting to get ticked off, because now they're starting to go after past EU officials in a raid, apparently some fraud investigation. So there was a fraud, and apparently in an office that at one time was run by Joseph Borrell. So anyway, this corruption could reach up the chain a bit. This could be a signal from Belgium to the European Union, is that you keep pushing, we'll keep investigating. And we still have the whole situation of Pfizergate with Ursula von der Leyen. Very little investigation has been done to track down those text messages. I'm sure they still exist somewhere. So possibly on a hard drive, some computer where they were put and people forgot to delete them. So anyway, Ursula herself could fall under the microscope of the Belgium legal system. So anyway, this could be one of the outcomes of Ursula pushing and pushing and pushing to get a hold of the Russian frozen assets. And if we take a look at the costs or the support for Ukraine, we have what the U.S. has sent since basically January of 2022, 114 billion, and Ukraine is looking for 90 billion. So that is, quite, and actually they need more than 90. They need, I think it's 150 billion over the next 2 years. So if you put together what the U.S. and Germany have provided Ukraine since January 2022 up until now, up until August 31st, you get an amount approximately what Ukraine needs for the next 2 years. So at the beginning of this conflict, much of Ukraine was still functioning economically. They were still financially pretty stable. A lot of they still had a lot of people working. A lot of people giving to the economy through their purchases, through their taxes. And as people began to scatter out of Ukraine and companies were destroyed, people began to hide away from the recruiters so that they would not be mobilized. The Ukrainian economy went way down, so their income went way down. Meanwhile, their financial needs continue to rise. So you can see if Ukraine received between the United States and Germany a similar amount to what they need for the next 2 years, then this is for 2026, 2027, then 2028, 2029, 2030, the needs of Ukraine will continue to rise considerably. So if the European Union doesn't have 90 billion to loan to Ukraine now, what are they going to need? Let's say they give the 90 billion to Ukraine, taken from an EU loan, taken from the EU budget, or whatever tricks they use to get the money to Ukraine. Then what kind of money are they going to need to come up with in 2028, 2029, 2030? Because for the moment, there's no end in sight to this conflict. So the financial needs of Ukraine will continue to rise. Their economy will continue to fall. And so that this is, the prospect of the EU being on the hook for maybe 200 to 300 billion, that could bankrupt those countries if they try to continue to indebt themselves to just keep this Ukraine, which is a kind of a zombie economy, going. So anyway, but don't even consider that. Consider the cost of what the refugees would cost those countries, because if you have more war, Russia's going to continue to advance further and further into Ukraine. More people will be uprooted. Imagine Kharkiv, which is the Ukraine's second largest city. Russia will eventually get to Kharkiv if this conflict doesn't end. And so the people who will leave Kharkiv, there's really no room for them in Kiev. There's no jobs, probably. So they're going to have to go to Romania or Poland or Germany to be able to earn a living. So anyway, then this push ups the cost for Germany, Poland, Romania, France, England. And some of these countries are now saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't really want any more refugees from these countries. So then where are they going to go? Are they going to go to the Scandinavian countries? Who's going to have the money to take care of their costs? So you can see that for Europe, the cost of the refugees is beginning to dwarf the amount of financial support. So, they're giving money to Ukraine to keep the war going, and then they wind up paying 2 or 3 times as much or more to sustain the refugee costs. So none of this makes any sense. It shouldn't make any sense to people in the European Union, but they're so blinded by ideology and by Russia-phobia, Russia hate, that I'm sure they will continue on. And do I think Ursula von der Leyen will eventually get her hands on the Russian frozen assets? I think eventually they could come up with a mechanism where just a majority vote would be enough to force Belgium to fork over the Russian frozen assets. And if that happens, what will happen to Euroclear? What will happen to the euro? I think everything will go south. And then the final question is, all this money that's going to Ukraine as loans, do you think it'll ever be paid back? Of course not. Once they are defeated by Russia, they will have zero financial obligations with these Western countries that supported the post-Maidan regimes in Ukraine. So they're not only loaning out money which they don't have, which is affecting their own country's finances, but they're never going to get it back. And even if the Ukraine government continues on after the war, despite a Russian victory, it'll be a rump state. They won't have Odessa, so they won't have any access to the Black Sea, probably. They will have lost some of their key cities. They're going to be losing Kramatorsk, Slovyansk. They will lose Kharkiv. They will lose Zaporizhia. They will lose Dnipro. They will lose Odessa and Kherson. They will lose access to the Black Sea. So all their grain's going to have to go through Poland, and Poland's not going to want that grain coming through because it affects their farmers. So where is Ukraine going to get the money back to repay these loans? It makes absolutely no sense that people would even think of giving any more money to Ukraine, because the more money they give, the more obligations they're going to have to cover. And eventually this will sink all of their economies if they're not careful. So anyway, long report. Sorry about that. I'll leave a link to all these different websites below in the description. If you like this video, please hit the like button. share and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you back for another video. Take care. Bye bye.